The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from FederalJack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is July 17th, 2014. Now I'm going back in time. Last month I was jumping ahead a month. Now I'm jumping behind a month. Apparently I want to stay in the beginning of summer. Anyway, it's July 17th, 2014. Too much going on. I told you I'm in the process of getting ready and getting everything together to move the Batcave to a new, even more secure location and a much safer spot. And amongst all that, plus doing the radio show, I think I fried my brain. So forgive me if my brain goes off the tracks tonight. Anyway, there's a few things that I want to go over tonight. First thing I guess we'll cover is this mess with the Flight 17, the Malaysian flight that got shot down. Don't get me started about some of the coincidences. But anyway, they're going to use this to try to stoke more tension for World War III if it wasn't done on purpose for that reason. We'll get into that. And I want to talk about the fact that in Florida, in 25 years of police shootings here in the Sunshine State, every one of them has been found to be justified. Every single shooting. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but I can tell you that by the law of averages alone and the way things work, that's impossible. That every one of those police shootings could be justified. Especially seeing what you see. Looking at it on paper, it might be easy to say that, but when you actually break down case by case, you see that, no, there's a lot of cases where they're not justified, but they're ruled justified anyway. And it's like that all over the country, but I'm highlighting a few cases in Florida tonight. And I'll be playing some audio, but I'm going to do my best to try to show you the video, too. I have links to the originating videos that actually NBC has, one of the local NBC affiliates down here, got their hands on it. And the laws that are on the books, and I don't know if it's a state thing or this is like a nationwide thing, but the law down here anyway is that before the media gets these videos and you see people being shot and killed, they always edit out the part where the person was shot and killed. They might show you right up until, and then they'll say, we can't show you because it's too graphic. Well, it's not that. They cut it out because they're, a lot of times, and sometimes the media receives it already edited. Now, the prosecutor's office will edit it out. Whoever does it, they'll edit that out, and then they'll give them, almost like a redacted version of the video. Well, down here, one of the local embassy affiliates down here in South Florida got their hands on, I guess you could say, the unredacted version of it. I think it was the county. I don't know if it was the county, or I guess it would have to be the state attorney's office. So yeah, I guess it would be through the state. But anyway, whatever, you'll hear it when I play the audio. But whatever agency, whether it was county or state, issued them the video, they didn't realize that they hadn't edited it yet. And when they realized they did, they wanted the video back. So before the NBC affiliate gave the video back, they aired it. So now it's in their archives. And, now it's all over the internet, and, it's free and clear for everybody to hear. So here, you guys can have your video back, but it's now been aired. Anyway, we'll get into that too. I'm going to spend probably the second hour on that because it's going to take a while. I have, there's 3 investigations that the local NBC affiliate did down here. And as I always say to you, the big, like CNN, MSNBC, even regular NBC News itself, ABC, yes, they're all controlled. And there are stories that are blocked from the local affiliates. And I'm sure you probably won't see this news story on, this won't be big headline news on like ABC or CNN or MSNBC or Fox. But the local affiliates, at least in the local area down here, it's a big story. So it's very important to always pay attention to the local news stations. And yes, you have to monitor the garbage, at least if you're going to debunk it and tear it apart, you do have to monitor CNN to a certain degree. The way I monitor it is I see the clips online. I refuse to sit there and watch that stuff. And I can't even, it makes my ears bleed. And I honestly want to reach through the TV and just smack them around because I know they're lying 99.9% of the time. But anyway, local coverage is important to go through and look at and pay attention to because that's where you end up finding little gems. And the 3 reports I'm going to play for you, and of course there is, even at the local level, they try to, they don't outright try to start a war with the police. We're gonna expose you. Rah! But they do a decent job of at least exposing what I consider to be the bigger problem. You'll hear a police union president talk about how we're at war with, as I said before, I've had arguments with SWAT team captains about this. We're at a war with scum in this country. Oh, that's nice. So you're at war inside the country. Well, yeah, it's a war versus scum. No, dude, you're not soldiers. You're police officers. You guys need to grow. Anyway, I'll get into it in an hour or two. I want to get into the Malaysian flight here. I want to get into this. So, the missing Malaysian flight. Does anybody else find this rather convenient that there's a missing flight, a missing Malaysian Airlines flight? Does anybody else find this a little bit convenient? Now, I say that because, of course, a plane just went missing a couple months back. And now they lose another one. Kind of makes me wonder if another air disaster happens within the next 6 months to a year to Malaysia Airlines, it's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. One time's an accident. Second time, really horrible coincidence. Third time would show a pattern. Don't know why there would be a pattern. I'd have to, you'd have to put all the stuff, look at all the evidence and see, what's up with Malaysia Airlines. But it's kind of odd that twice in the past couple months, they seem to have a tragedy. To be honest with you, the first thing I thought when I saw the headline today, Malaysian Airlines plane shot out of the sky, the first thing I thought of wasn't, they found the plane that was missing. And they realized it was shot down because I've postulated that the missing, was it Flight 370, the one that went missing months ago, was shot down by a government and they just didn't want to say anything. Now you actually have one being shot down. And it's amazing how they found those black boxes in that plane real quick. Well, I guess because it crashed over land, right? Makes you wonder if the first one was a dry run to see if maybe the missile could hit it. Maybe they got their hands on one of those launchers, and they wanted to see if it had the capability of not, if it would actually work. Maybe I don't know. I mean, that's just full-on speculation. But the point is, when I first heard that this plane was shot down, my first thought was, they must have blown the dust off of 370, remotely piloted it up to a certain, height, packed it with the bodies of, whoever that maybe all the missing passengers that were on the other one, and shot it out of the sky. And I said, well, we'll see if that's the case, judging by whether or not there's passenger manifests and any other evidence that could back up who was on the plane and who exactly the people were and everything else. But I have to honestly say, my mind, the first thing my mind went to, and it's not like, yes, I talk about conspiracies, but I always tell everybody don't jump to conclusions. But I have to be honest and tell you, the first thing I thought when I heard that this plane went down was, wow, they knocked the dust off 370 and they remotely flew it somewhere and then shot it out of the sky. Now, for those of you that think that's impossible to do, they were talking about doing this during Operation Northwoods. They were talking about having a plane be flown out of Miami, and then they would hijack it and divert it to another base, offload the passengers, and then put the plane back in the air, and then it would be being tracked and flying along its path, blah, 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 and then on board they would have remote explosives, remote controlled explosives that they could detonate, obviously by remote, and they'd blow the plane out of the sky, and then they were going to blame it on Cuban terrorists in order to have a pretext for an invasion of Cuba. So it's not like they couldn't have shot the thing out of the sky. Anyway, and I mean the first one. But I really, that was the first thing that popped into my head was, wow, here we go. And then I looked into it, and so far I've seen that there are people saying that, oh yes, we've been able to, mainstream sources, we've been able to confirm the passenger manifest, and there's 23 Americans on board. I'd want to be able to see the passenger manifests myself, like have that public, so you could see the names of the people, and I'd want to see confirmation that there are people that were on that plane that really, were killed. That would be my first, looking into this as an investigator, that'd be the first thing I do. And, as I look into it, that's one of the first things I focused on was, okay, let's see if the people are real. Now, I don't have a physical manifest in my hand, so I don't know for sure. And I'm not saying that it's fake or anything like that. Oh my God, they took the Malaysian Airlines and they blew it. No, all I'm saying is they've had plans since the 60s to do it. They've had the ability to remotely control huge passenger jets for a very long time. I mean, in the 70s, you'll see videos. In the 70s and 80s, you'll see videos, especially the 70s, when they were testing all new runways, and they were having a lot of aircraft accidents and airport, runway incidents and things. They started to build denser runways that could handle the planes landing down, because that puts a beating on the runways. They were testing new types of jet fuel, where Boeing was taking 747s and remotely flying them and then crashing them on purpose with a full fuel load just to see how it would explode and how the fireball would progress and everything else because they were trying to build a safer, less explosive fuel. And you can go look all this up. This is all fact. And they were remotely flying planes back in the 70s. There's military plans that had plans to do it back in the 60s when Kennedy was in. Maybe they weren't as sophisticated as they are today, but they still had the capability to do it. So don't put it, you can't look at any of these situations and be like, well, that never happened. That would never, no. We have to be open-minded. That being said, we can't jump on everything, like I always say. Got to have facts, but to be quite honest with all of you, because I always tell you, don't just jump to it could be a conspiracy right off the bat. I have to be honest. The first thing I thought of was, Oh, God, they blew the dust off of Flight 370. So anyway, now the story is that the Russians shot the plane down. This is what the Ukrainians are saying. And, of course, the Western media is running with this. The AP, Ukraine, pro-Russia rebels downed Malaysian plane. So the Ukraine is accusing pro-Russian separatists of shooting the plane down. There's people that are accusing the Russians of shooting it down in support of these pro-Russian separatists. The area that it happened in, they're having a huge problem, the Ukrainian government, with losing members of its armed forces. They're taking just massive casualties as of late, apparently. And I don't know. I mean, massive to them could be 100 guys or 150 people lost in 3 or 4 days of fighting. So depending on the size of their force. So I don't know the exact numbers, but from reports that are coming out, the Ukrainian military is taking heavy losses compared to the pro-Russian separatists. Perhaps that's because the pro-Russians are pissed off because the Ukrainian government over there in Kiev, they've been bombing innocent people. And when I say bombing innocent people, the United States here, our media is like, well, terrorists in Ukraine were bombed today, pro-Russian terrorists. When you go actually see the video footage of who was hit, they're villagers living in these little like shack-like houses out in the middle of nowhere. And they get bombed. Oh, but that was a military target, right? They were terrorists. Well, there was probably a terrorist hiding in there. Right, because it's really easy to drop a bomb on a bunch of innocent people and then turn around and just blame terrorists for it. Where do I see that going on? You know, they say the people in the Ukraine are fascists, right? Where else do I see a bunch of fascists dropping bombs on a bunch of people? Where have I talked about people getting blown up by fascists with bombs before and a wanton desire to just kill? Oh, that's right, the past 2 days. The whole Gaza, Palestine, Israel thing. When one person has an ideology that's all about control and power, police state type tactics, crushing, whoever you don't like, literally, willing to kill innocent civilians, it seems that they're just willing to drop bombs on people. And our government turns a blind eye. La 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 la, la 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 la, we love the Ukrainians, F the Russians, Russians, you bad, you communist, Russia, Cold War, rah. Syria? You're having a civil war? You better not shoot any of those Al-Qaeda rebels we sent over there that are calling themselves Syrians. You better not shoot at any of some of the real Syrians that are fighting the Assad government, whether or not they're brainwashed, whatever reasons they're doing it. You better not shoot at them, Assad. You better let them kill your men, or we will bomb you, because we are America with NATO. Dun, dun, dun. Then Israel and the Ukraine are doing it, and we're like, 4! Oh, I got a nice slice on that one. Oh, the wind is taking it. Oh, snap. I think I'm going to be 1 or 2 under par on this one. Ugh. That's all I can say. Ugh. There's nothing else to describe it. It's disgusting. And you can't tell me, you can't have it both ways. You can't. You can't be cool with Israel and the current government in Ukraine doing to their own people, the government in Kiev doing to its own people what they're doing right now. And then turn around and say things like, "We will freedom agenda in the Middle East. We have to free these people from dictators. Saddam was a dictator. It was about freedom. Assad, you better not fight with your own people, or we will come in and bomb you. Ukraine, go right ahead. Israel, high five. Here's some weapons." How two-faced is that? But hey, let's start another war with Russia. Coincidentally, by the way, this missing Malaysian Airlines thing happens the same time that we're putting new sanctions on Russia. Yeah, let's not focus on the VA. Let's not focus on the southern border. Let's not focus on anything else. Let's focus on putting sanctions on Russia. Well done. Well done. So obviously your real agenda is to escalate tensions with Russia. Why would you do that? Why are we pissing off Iran? Why are we trying to escalate things to a certain extent with Iran, even if it's on the back end? Russia, even China. Why would we do that? That doesn't make any rational sense. Anybody with half a brain would be like, this is a bad idea. Because they're setting up for World War III, and they're setting up who's going to be the axis of evil and who's going to be the allies versus the axis. We'll go back to very simple terminology from World War II. That's what I see this whole thing as being as. But I'm not saying that the plane wasn't shot down. Obviously, there's wreckage. Even if it's a complete, let's take the conspiracy aspect of it being, Flight 370 being involved in this. Let's remove that out of it and look at it from this perspective. Obviously, even if the plane was shot down by pro-Russian separatists, this, by definition, was a conspiracy because 2 or more people would have had to have taken part in shooting the plane down, right? It would have required more than 2 people to triangulate the plane's exact position, know where it was going to be, blah, 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 blah. So, by definition, this was a conspiracy. Now it's just a matter of who conspired to shoot Malaysian Flight 17 down, MH17. It's just a matter of who conspired. But it's a conspiracy, because obviously, by definition, a conspiracy is 2 or more people getting together to do something bad. This is bad. Killed 298 people and blew a plane out of the sky. Very bad. 2 or more people involved, at least. You're not going to find, you're going to tell me that they're going to have the lone missileman? It's the lone launcher! One guy off like Lee Harvey Oswald style, right? I'm pissed. I'll show the government. I'm gonna shoot down a plane. Right? Really? Gonna try to pull that meme off again, 100 times over? No, I doubt you're gonna see the lone missileman. In this case, it'll be the lone country. What country? What one lone nation would benefit from shooting down a Malaysian airliner? And let me ask you this. How would Russia or pro-Russian separatists benefit in any way, shape, or form shooting an airliner down at 35,000 feet? First of all, how the hell can pro-Russian separatists who barely have shoulder-fired rockets, which will go up to maybe 15,000 feet at the most, how can these guys know where a plane, a passenger jet, is going to be flying over? They don't have access to radio control towers and air control towers, or their version of the FAA, or whatever the hell they have over in the Ukraine. How the hell are they going to know when that plane's flying exactly where and what coordinates to be looking in the area of to find that plane? Well, the only people that would know that really would be the people in the Ukrainian government, because they'd be able to track the plane via whatever, version of their version of the FAA. They even if they had commercial companies doing it, running the airports, whatever, the way that these planes fly around, I mean, if they couldn't, you can't possibly believe that they wouldn't be monitoring it and that the government wouldn't know it was coming in, right? You're going to tell me there's just countries that have air traffic coming in, but they don't have any air traffic control systems? How do the planes fly in and out then? How do the pilots know? At 35,000 feet, it's a little difficult to tell which direction. Hey, which way is New York, unless you have instruments? Or you're flying, say you're flying away from New York, you can go behind us, but that's kind of vague. How would you get your bearing? Well, you have to have instrument ratings. So it's a little hard for me to believe that the government of the current government control over there in Kiev wouldn't have access to the information and know the flight plan of this thing, especially if it's flying through their territory. I'm pretty sure that if I remember correctly, when all of these airline companies, as far as I know, they have to file flight plans, especially if they're going through countries. They have to let those countries know that they're coming through it, so those countries know that they're not an enemy plane, right? Why would Russia shoot it down? See, the government in Kiev benefits from this, because they can say, just like you see them, again, it's all in the reaction. The plane wasn't finished smoldering, and they're like, the Russians did it, and we'll show you proof. how do you have proof? How do you know that? You can't honestly have evidence that this thing was shot down by whoever until after a few days, because you'd have to gather the evidence and analyze it and put it together to create a cohesive conclusion. There's no scientific method when a plane goes down and 5 minutes later, the Russians did it. Well, show me the evidence. Unless you caught the Russian with his finger on the button and he's live streaming it onto YouTube, I don't believe it. I just absolutely do not believe it. It's all crap. It's too convenient. Well, we have proof and we'll show you. And how many times have they brought proof to the table and it's fake? Or they've promised to bring proof to the table and they never do. So I don't want to hear, we'll bring proof to the table, we'll bring proof to the table, we'll bring proof to the table. Then bring it. Do you know what? Don't make accusations about Russia shooting the plane down or anybody else shooting the plane down until you have empirical evidence. Because even if it's not true, it still it gets that meme out there into the mass brainwashed people, society. Oh my God, those freaking Russians, they shot down that plane and killed almost 300 innocent people. But you don't know that they did. But you'll just go with that meme anyway because that's what's already been programmed into your head because you've been maybe driving down the road and that's what you heard on the radio. And then they'll do the retraction at 3 o'clock in the morning when nobody hears it. That's how they get away with things. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. So, again, you have to ask yourself, how in the world would the Russian government benefit by shooting this plane down? I know the Ukrainian government in Kiev right now, backed by our government here, that, of course, they can do no wrong over in Kiev. You know, those fascists, they can do no wrong. Well done, State Department. You guys are so freaking transparent, it's not even funny anymore. I don't even know why you guys have that chick come out, that spokesperson. She comes out like once a day and just, she stands at the podium. She gets asked real questions, says, I can't give you any information on that, and then we'll throw out the propaganda and then turns around and walks away. I mean, what's the point? We just see through it anyway. But, so you have the Ukrainian government. Russia did it. Show me the proof. I think you're lying. Well, who are you? You're just a radio show host. No, I'm a free thinker, and I think you're full of it. And I'm also an experienced investigator. So, again, show me the money. Put the evidence in my hand and let me go through it myself. Not your analysis, not a one-page, formal analysis of your crap. I want the entire kit and caboodle. Give me all of the documents. Your entire investigation. Oh, it just happened today and you don't have any paperwork done yet on your investigation. Oh, well, then you shouldn't be making conclusions. Who taught you how to do an investigation? Oh, you're just using this for political gains. Oh, okay. Now, why would you want to blame Russia? I mean, think about it, people. What would Russia gain from shooting down a commercial airliner from that belongs to Malaysia and filled with all sorts of Europeans, perhaps Americans? Interesting that the flight that gets shot down, I was told that there was a large number of children on board the plane. Isn't it interesting how children always seem to get, it's always the plane loaded with kids that get shot down? Not saying that a plane loaded with like older people or middle-aged people would be better, but anybody notice that it's always a bunch of kids that have to get killed in one of these events? Because it's for the kids. Those poor, innocent children. Yet, what about the innocent children over in Gaza? Oh, they're not so innocent because they're Arabs, right? And it's different because Israel's doing it, so it's okay. Or what about the poor, innocent people out in I can't even remember all the different names of all the different little towns and villages out in the outskirts of Ukraine that the Kiev government's been bombing. What about those innocent people and their innocent kids that get killed, right? So it's just interesting that it's always a large number of children. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Again, I haven't seen the passenger manifest, but once I get my hands on the manifest, if there was a large amount of kids on there, it wouldn't surprise me. Now, there's a few things. I'm going to read an article about this, and I want to play an audio clip actually about this that Aaron and Melissa over at True Stream Media put together, and I want to play the clip for you guys because they bring up some of the same stuff, but their own questions as well and their own little analysis of it. But I want to read you an article that a good friend of mine, been on the broadcast before, wrote for Activist Post, Brandon Turbeville. You've all heard him on the broadcast before. Great researcher and author. I want to read an article he wrote about this Malaysian flight, and I'm going to play the clip from Aaron and Mel. 6 reasons to question the official story of the Malaysian flight over Ukraine. What I'll do right now, before I even read it, you guys can read it with me. And I just dropped it into the chat, the link over there on Activist Post for Brandon's article. Again, titled, if you're not, if you're listening and you're in your vehicle or whatever and you can't get to it now, you can always go back and listen to the archive, whatever, or if you're listening in the archive, the title is 6 Reasons to Question the Official Story of the Malaysian Flight Over Ukraine. And it's on Activist Post. If you go to Activist Post and just look up Brandon Turbeville, like under the contributors of the author section, whatever it is they have there, you can click on it, his name, and it'll show you all the articles he's published, and it'll be listed right there. But if you go there within the next couple hours, I'm sure it'll be on the front page. One more time, 6 reasons to question the official story of the Malaysian flight over Ukraine. Here we go. With the recent shooting down of a Malaysian Boeing 777 over Ukraine, the Western media is aflame with finger-pointing at Russia and Ukrainian separatists. However, while NATO and its media mouthpieces attempt to rekindle the Cold War and ignite a confrontation with Russia, there exists a number of fundamental questions surrounding the events that have taken place in eastern Ukraine. Although not a detailed list, below are 6 reasons why one should question the official story of the Malaysian flight shot down over the Ukraine. Number 1. The Ukrainian separatists do not have the military hardware capable of shooting down an airplane at the height of which the Malaysian Boeing 777 was flying. Ukrainian separatists are equipped with shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles which are capable of bringing down an airplane. This much is true. However, the systems believed to be possessed by the separatists are those such as the LGLA missile system, which is incapable of hitting planes at the altitude at which the Malaysian flight was flying. Which I said, most like Stinger missiles can hit, I think the effective range, this is not going to rack my brain, I have way too much stuff in there, but if I remember correctly off the top of my head, I think the range of a Stinger is somewhere between like 15 and 19,000 feet at the most. Like that's and I think that's even with 19, I think it's pushing. I think it's the effective range of Stinger missiles more close to like somewhere, I think it's like somewhere between 15 and 19,000. I can't remember the exact number, but that's, passenger jets aren't flying that low unless they're either on a quick skip, a little hop and a jump, because they're not going to have time to get up to 33,000 feet and then get back down. And I'm talking like if you were going from like Tampa to Miami, they might only travel at like 15, 18,000 feet. But most flights, even if you're going from like New York to California or New York to Florida, you're going to have more than enough time to get up to 33,000 feet and then come back down. Flying, it's not really going in a straight line like you think. You're kind of going in an arc. It's almost like shooting. Anyway, most people don't realize that when you shoot from a rifle, the bullet actually doesn't travel in a straight pattern. It actually travels in an arc and then lands on the target. Anyway, I know, my brain is like, woo! So anyway, back to the height of the plane. The Ukrainian separatists do not have shoulder-fired rockets that are capable of hitting a plane at 33,000 feet. So 33,000 feet is simply too high an altitude to be reached with the shoulder-fired missile delivery systems with which the Ukrainian separatists are currently outfitted. There is no evidence to suggest that the separatists possess the BUK missile systems. At the time of the writing of this article, this writer is not aware of any reports suggesting that separatists have commandeered BUK missile launching systems from the Kiev fascist government forces. The only way they could have acquired them, unless given the BUK by Russia, which itself is highly unlikely given Russian strategic concerns. Why would, Russia wouldn't be that stupid. I mean, the way that they try to pass things off on the American people is, you're dumb, and just believe our really dumbed down base level consciousness excuse for things and justification for things, which is not really a justification at all. Number 2, the Kiev forces do have the BUK missile launching system, meaning the key government in Kiev currently. While separatist forces are not known to possess missile systems as advanced as the BUK system, the Kiev forces most certainly do. The BUK system, which requires transportation and mounting on a tracked vehicle or a large truck, is not likely to be in the hands of rebels surviving on Russian small farms and on other basic forms of military and tactical aid. BUK is much more the type of system that would be property of a national government. If the Malaysian plane was shot down using the BUK system, it is the Kiev military forces that should immediately be investigated, especially if it was shot down in Ukraine. Duh. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out, people. Number 3. Kiev moved its BUK system to the Donetsk area the day before. Reports emerging from Russian news agencies like ITAR-TASS suggest that the Kiev military moved its BUK missile system into the area surrounding Donetsk on Wednesday, one day before the Malaysian flight was shot down, allegedly using that very missile launching system. Red flag. Big red flag. But no, you can't look at them because the Ukrainians would never do that. That's not being objective at all in an investigation. That's not being separate. You're taking a side. I mean, if this was a police investigation and I rolled up as an investigator, right? Like someone called the cops because there was a fight between two people, Russia and Ukraine, or the two people, and or somebody, there's a fight, there's an incident, and someone's killed, and Ukraine is blaming Russia, and Russia's saying, I didn't do it, I don't know what he's talking about. If I came right up immediately and wasn't impartial and said, Russia, you had to have done it because the Ukrainians would never do that. The government Kiev, they would never do that. Really? That's not being impartial. That's not an investigation. You've already decided what you want. So you're not really investigating. What you're doing is you're creating a narrative to suit the outcome you've already decided. That's how they do this. They don't actually do an investigation. They come in under the guise of doing an investigation with the outcome already what they want, and then they skewer the facts to fit that. That's how it goes. But don't pay any attention to that. Anyway, back to the article. The fact that the type of missiles allegedly used to shoot down the Malaysian flight were not only possessed by the Ukrainian military, but moved to the very region and area where the shoot-down occurred implicates the Kiev forces vastly more than it does the Russians or the Ukrainian separatists. Very well said, Brandon. Number 4. The questions surrounding why the Malaysian flight was flying over the area to begin with. Yeah, there's a big thing. Captain Sully Sullenberger, the guy that crash landed that plane in the Hudson River and saved all those people from sheer death, right? He's even said, why were they flying a plane directly over a war zone? That doesn't make any sense. American flight companies aren't flying their planes, and as far as I know, like every European flight company, airplane company, whatever you want to call them, airline company, they're avoiding that area. Because it's a hotbed. They don't want to accidentally be shot down. Any pilot, it's like flying 101. Hey, there's a war going on over here. Well, don't fly over it because you wouldn't want to be mistaken for an enemy plane and shot down accidentally. And yet this Malaysian flight flies right through the heart of Ukraine, right through this whole civil war area. Really? 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 I'm supposed to just believe that? Anyway. As reported by The Atlantic, the Federal Aviation Administration placed an order prohibiting American pilots, airlines, charter carriers, and anyone else over whom the FAA has direct jurisdiction from flying over parts of Ukraine. Nearly 3 months ago. This flight prohibition clearly demonstrates that aviation authorities fully understood that this particular flight path was over a dangerous area. So why was the Malaysian flight flying over this area to begin with? Why was it there? That's a big question. Oh, well, Popeye, you're implicating that. No. You can't just diffuse the question by saying, well, there's no conspiracy. The Russians did it, blah, 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 blah. You don't know that. An impartial investigation, you can't, the Ukraine's going to investigate whether it shot it down itself. Yeah, like they're not going to blame the Russians. He did it. Come on. But that's an impartial investigation. Let's start a war based on that. 5. The timing of the event. The shooting down of the Malaysian flight conveniently comes only a day after claims by the Ukrainian military that Russia shot down a Ukrainian jet fighter over Ukrainian territory. It also comes only days after the Western media seized on reports suggesting that the Russian government was considering targeted strikes inside Ukraine in order to protect the Ukrainian people, ethnic Russians, and Russian interests. Lastly, it comes only hours after the United States issues a statement announcing yet another round of sanctions against Russia. So, oh look, Russia's pissed. They shot a plane down to get even with us. So they shot a Malaysian airliner down? How does that benefit them? 6, another Malaysian 777. The fact that the flight shot down over Ukraine is the same type of flight that went missing over the Indian Ocean only months before is a highly questionable coincidence. Such a coincidence is almost too big to be believed. Given the track record of the United States, NATO, and governments in general throughout history, one must at least wonder whether or not the recent shoot-down of the Malaysian flight over Ukraine was not simply a false flag designed to drum up national fervor in a new Cold War, ultimately leading to a confrontation with Russia, and I'll also add to that, /China. It is important for the Western public and the rest of the world to become more streetwise regarding incidents such as the Malaysian flight, and that they immediately cease to accept an entirely discredited government and media's explanations as truth. Again, the article is titled 6 Reasons to Question the Official Story of the Malaysian Flight Over Ukraine by Brandon Turbeville over at activistpost.com. You've heard Brandon on the radio show before. Great, just excellent researcher. You obviously, you heard me read the article. You could tell that it's well thought out and well researched. And this is, and I'm sure Brandon probably did that in 45 minutes or an hour. He probably put it together. So imagine if he can go out there, and I don't know how long it took him to put the article together, but even if it was a couple hours, imagine he was able just to go and do, knowing from doing research over the course of time, all this information is stored in his head. He can go put an article together like this in a brief period of time with facts, boom, 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 boom. 6 reasons why, the official story so far is crap. And you don't see the media doing this. You don't see anybody else. I mean, the alternative media, yes, but that mainstream that everybody still, attaches to, like the teat, and they're sucking at the teat. Oh, I need the mainstream media milk. No, you don't. Stop it. Go over to Activist Post. Go to other websites. Go to truthfrequencyradio.com. Go over to federaljack.com. That's where you'll find real news. And there's others out there, too, that I haven't mentioned. Just because I mentioned 3 doesn't mean there aren't other great sources. I could sit here for 2 hours reading off sites for you to go to. It would be a really boring show. Anyway, go check out Brandon Turbeville over at Activist Post. He does a radio show, too. I urge you to check his radio show out. He's got all this stuff over at, I think it's BrandonTurbeville.com is the website. He's got all of his stuff posted up there. Check it out. Again, 6 reasons to question the official story of the Malaysian flight over the Ukraine. Okay, so as I said, I have an audio clip that I want to play for you. Let me see how much time I have. I should have just enough time. Yes, I do. This is from Aaron and Mel over at Truth Stream Media, my good friends over there. They did a video covering the Malaysian flight and some of the things that they see. And some of it's the same stuff I said, but I want you to hear their analysis of it because it's pretty spot on. So check it out.
Aaron and Melissa here for True Stream Media.
Hey, guys.
And a terrible tragedy today. Some 300 people dead, shot down from a Malaysian airline passenger jet. All this a major provocation in the ongoing Ukraine civil war. It raises tension significantly with Russia and the U.S. Could even tip towards a wider World War III type scenario, all while Israel is conveniently invading Gaza on the ground today.
And this is what the mainstream media is reporting, that a Malaysia Airlines flight carrying 280 passengers and 15 crew, potentially 23 of them American, went down at the Ukrainian-Russian border on its way from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. And almost immediately, both sides, the separatists and the Ukrainian officials, were denying any involvement in this. And then just as immediately, the foreign ministry in Kiev said that it was Russia that did this, that it was a Russian missile system that brought the Boeing down, and that they have evidence that they're going to show that this was the Russians that did it. And President Poroshenko later came out to say they're not calling it an accident, they're not calling it a disaster, they're calling this an act of terrorism, those key words there. As soon as that happened, Moscow came out to say that these allegations are completely absurd. And if you've been paying attention, it does seem completely absurd. I mean, what would Moscow have to gain from bringing down a European flight that's heading to Asia that has nothing to do with what's going on in Ukraine at all? They're saying this is absurd. Almost every day, Russia gets exposed and receives threats of irrefutable evidence that will be released, but every time the evidence disappears somewhere, and the confusion is being covered with new, more fantastic accusations all the time.
And it wouldn't be the first time they claim they have evidence to prove this or that. Of course, it happened in Syria with the chemical weapons. John Kerry said they had irrefutable proof the Syrian government had done this. But it is the important question of why, who benefits from taking down a passenger jet in the middle of a war. It only makes whoever took it down look like horrible monsters. Did the pro-Russian separatists, with the help of Russia, actually take this plane down? Or was it a blame and shame operation from NATO, from the United States, and from the U.S.-backed puppet in Ukraine to provoke this war and make Russia look bad? It's an important and valid question.
I mean, and the mainstream media is scripting this whole thing left and right, making it look more and more like a false flag by the moment. I mean, you have this Associated Press article up at Yahoo News, Obama-Putin discuss Malaysia plane incident, and our new press secretary, Josh Earnest, the guy whose name just even sounds fake, claims that Obama just so happened to be on the phone with Putin when news of the plane broke. So Obama was saying, yeah, I know I'm about to go to Martha's Vineyard for my vacation. Better stop and call Putin real quick. Oh, hey, Putin, what's up? Oh, no, look, a downed plane. What happened? And then immediately he goes on to give a speech in Delaware where he says they're working to determine if there were Americans on board, which all of the media outlets are claiming 23 of those people were American. He says that's our first priority. Then he gets off the stage and immediately gets on the phone with President Poroshenko. So, I mean, it all looks it looks like a movie unfolding right now.
And with 23 Americans killed on board, that somehow gives the U.S. jurisdiction in bringing about maybe what ends up being a NATO action or blaming Russia. And of course, they put sanctions on them today. Very important act of war in itself. U.S. levied sanctions against Russia's major energy industries. And all this with the curious downing of this passenger jet during a week when the Russian separatists have been bringing down military planes on the border of Ukraine over there. And they talk about how the rebels quickly put their new rockets to work. Monday, they brought down an AN-26 military transport plane. They took credit for it. A couple days later, they took down 2 Su-25 fighter jet planes, took credit for it. And earlier today, apparently took down an AN-24 plane. Those were all military aircraft, again, in the middle of a civil war. But that is now going to be overshadowed by this passenger jet that they're claiming they shot down as well.
Now, see, these things make sense. This thing doesn't make any sense. And what makes even less sense is why this plane was even flying over this war zone to begin with. And a lot of people are raising this question because it doesn't make any sense. Why would... I mean, there's been all kinds of warnings that commercial flights should stay away from this area.
And then you have this flight path coming from Amsterdam to Asia, cutting right through the entirety of Ukraine and going right over the heart of the conflict area.
I mean, why would they do that, especially when you see all these other flights in the area, and they're not doing that. You've got a lot of flights down here. Why wouldn't they just divert through Turkey or some other way? Why would they have to go right over this area where all this conflict is going on? Doesn't make any sense at all. And you have to also look at some of the other things that have been going on with this. I mean, just yesterday, reports were coming out that the rebels were reclaiming a village on the Russian border. And then you have Angela Merkel getting on the phone with Poroshenko and Obama to discuss the unfolding security crisis and what they're going to do about it. And that was just yesterday, just before the sanctions got slapped on and just before this happened. And people are asking the question right here, did NATO shoot down a Malaysian airliner over Ukraine to blame it on Russia? And according to the editor here, they're saying unless Malaysian airplanes have an uncanny tendency to just go off the radar every few months, this recent downing of FLT MH-17 over Ukraine seems more like it was cooked up by NATO assets in a civil war-torn country, perhaps in a desperate attempt to ramp up public opinion against Russia, whose proxies in the eastern part of the country are making a mockery of the NATO-backed Ukrainian army and its attempt to crush rebels. Notice how the Reuters report below is beginning to construct the narrative, a telltale sign of a false flag, and they're go ahead and asking the question, and it should be asked.
You have to ask the question. This is how foreign policy really works. They create attacks and blame it on enemies to start wars, to exacerbate tensions, and to really drive world politics. If we don't ask the question,
I'm going to pause it for a second. They're right. Gleiwitz. What do you think Hitler used as an excuse to invade Poland? The Gleiwitz incident. Go look it up. Completely staged, false flag type event, and that's what Hitler used as the justification to invade Poland. Go look it up.
Not being courageous enough to embrace the truth of what's really going on across the whole map of what this all means.
This is what's been going on in Ukraine that's not being reported on in our mainstream media, except for this one line, which is very telling. President Petro Poroshenko, by the way, the globalist billionaire that we helped put into power there, okay, is announcing to the world that he's going on the offensive to rid Ukraine of parasites. Very Nazi-esque talk. He's been blowing the crap out of people over there, and our government has been aiding and abetting him doing that. And these aren't terrorists like they're saying. These are just regular people who didn't vote the way the globalists wanted them to in the last Ukrainian election. That's who these people... Look, this is a pro-Russian separatist standing in front of her base. More like a lady standing in front of her house, and they're just blowing these people up. And they're using this guise of terrorism to do it, which is why it's very key that you have Poroshenko over here saying that this is an act of terrorism, that it's not a mistake, that it's not an accident. That you like to use that word, throw that out there, and then use it as an excuse to do all kinds of horrible things. And basically what's been going on here is a Ukrainian genocide.
And you can't avoid the 800-pound gorilla in the room of that being the Russian sphere. They controlled Ukraine, of course, under the Soviet era. Horrible things happened there. The U.S., very tense, trying to use Eastern European countries for its advantage, and now they're using the split in eastern Ukraine as an excuse just to wipe people out and mow them down based on their political loyalties.
And all the while, in the meantime, casually in the background, Israel was like, oh, here's our chance. Let's end that ceasefire and get in there and blow up some more people in Gaza. So now 240 people have been killed in a horrible ground offensive. 80% of those people are civilians, a lot of women and children. They're just going to keep it going. The globalists love this stuff.
Great report from Aaron and Melissa. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have all the facts, but I can tell you right now that I am pretty sure that Russia didn't shoot that plane down. If I was a betting man, I'd say it was the Ukrainian government that did it. Not the Russian separatists? Really? Really?
This is Sparta!
They're just trying to start World War III, ladies and gentlemen. Pay attention. Turn off Fox News. Seriously. Turn that crap off. Turn off CNN and turn off MSNBC. Don't even let it play in the background. Put something else on. Put some classical music on. It'll help your brain think instead of listening to that garbage. We're going to break. We'll be back hour number 2 in 3 minutes. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. It is July 17th, 2014. And the year is just going by. Anybody else notice that? I know, quite often you'll hear a radio show host say that, when he comes back in from break or something, and it might sound like radio shtick. But I assure you it's not. Actually, as I was repeating the date off to you, and sometimes I've said this in the past, but I haven't said it in a while, and I just didn't even realize it. As soon as I said it is July 17th, 2014, wow, it's July 17th already. 2014. It's a couple more months, and we'll be 2 years from when the Earth was supposed to be destroyed. 2012, December 21st. Remember, that was just like right around the corner, right? I can remember everybody freaking out about it. It's going to be 2 years this year. Holy crap. So 2 years, I say we should instead of like 2014, we should just say +2. Because we started over again anyway. I told you, be careful. No sleep, doing lots of things. My brain is all over the place. All right. So here in hour 2, I said I wanted to get into cops out of control here down in Florida. Now, however long this takes me to cover, I'm going to cover it. If I have to spend the rest of the hour, which I just might be required to do, because there's a few other things I wanted to talk about, but I want to spend a decent amount of time on this subject. So, the local NBC affiliate down here in South Florida did a 3-part investigation on the out-of-control cops and tactics that we have here in the state of Florida. And when I say out-of-control cops and out-of-control tactics, I mean anybody that turns on the TV, you know what I'm talking about. You have it in your home state as well. But this investigation, it was spurred by, according to them, it was spurred by this one incident, which you'll hear all about. I have 3 pieces of the investigation I'm going to play for you. I'm going to drop the links as I talk about each one into the chat room. In fact, the first one I'm going to talk about, I will drop in right now. And it's, when you see the video, you have to watch the video. I mean, you'll hear the audio, it's a radio show, I talk about it, but I urge you to go see the video. And if you go over to truthfrequencyradio.com, and then there's a listen live tab there, and if you put your mouse over it, it'll pop down and it'll say like stream 1, stream 2, and then at the bottom it'll say chat room. Click on the chat room. It'll open up the chat page. It'll bring you to the chat portal. Okay, that way you can interact with the listeners and myself there. Or you can go over to federaljack.com to the listen live page for Down the Rabbit Hole, and that'll bring you to a page with a portal to the same chat. It's you'll see the chat room right there, and it's the same chat, so you can hop in that way. It's just like having a secondary door to the bar, as it were. So go there, and I'll be dropping the links to the stories as I discuss each investigation into the chat room. That's why I always tell the people, go to the chat, even if you don't chat with others. I use the chat as a repository of information and links and stuff. So if I'm talking about something on air, I throw the link out there in the chat, and then you guys can run with it. I want you to. I want you to click on that link and then read it, and not just share it and think that you did the greatest thing, but read it, put that in your little your little file folder in your brain of information wherever you store it, and perhaps it'll spur you to do more research. Maybe you'll write your own articles and do your own podcasts. Anyway, so the links are over in the chat room. FederalJack.com listen live page, or go over to truthfrequencyradio.com. On the listen live tab, hover your mouse over it, and you'll see the drop down come down, click chat room, and there you go. You'll be in the room, and you'll be able to chat with everybody. And the chatters, and there's a lot of regular chatters. They come in here. Everybody in the chat room has really good conversations. It's pretty much troll free. And when one comes in, we smash it with the troll hammer, which is very big. The band hammer is huge, and what was shiny and silvery, but now it's covered in green troll blood, and we don't wash it off. We leave all the green troll blood on there as a warning. Anyway, it's a good chat. Go in there. A lot of free-thinking individuals, a lot of smart individuals in there talking. Just a great conversation. So go head over to the chat and hang out with them. So, getting to this NBC investigation. First, we start off with the link I dropped in the chat says, the title is, County Agrees to Pay $600,000 for Deaths in Botched Miami-Dade Sting. Now, the investigation, it focuses on Miami-Dade County. Now, obviously, that's because the NBC affiliate down here is local to South Florida, and this is a pretty big problem in Dade County. But Dade County is not the only county in Florida or city, or area in Florida that has a problem with police brutality. And you'll hear them even talk about what I said back in the first hour, how in 25 years of police shootings, in the past 25 years, every police shooting in Florida has been ruled justified. Every one. That's impossible. Cops are fallible humans. We've seen cases where they overreacted and beat the crap out of people. The Florida State Trooper down here, the fat Florida State Trooper, out of shape donut eater, which I'm not making fun of him, it's exactly what he was. And he was like 300 pounds overweight, and he couldn't chase this, 16, 17-year-old girl who was trying to run while handcuffed. So he tased her, and her head hit the concrete. She became a vegetable. She later died. Now, those kind of incidents happen with guns. They said that was justified. They said he was justified in doing that and causing her to be brain damaged because he was trying to protect her from. She could have run out to the highway. So to save her from being hit by a car, you turned her into a vegetable. And part of that is because of the police unions. You'll hear the police union president. I'll stop it when he's talking, but you'll hear the police union president. He's just a disgusting individual. He's like, I think these men are heroes. They shot one guy, and although the guy was a bad dude, he was a home invader, he had given up his weapon, and he was cowering under a tree. And 4 cops with AR-15s move in on him, and you see it. You see the IR footage of it from the helicopter that they were flying overhead with, and you see these cops unloading on this guy. They shot him, I think it was 57 times, and he was unarmed. Now, again, he was armed at one point, but he had thrown the gun away, and he was cowering under a tree. There were 4 of them with body armor, and this guy with a T-shirt and a pair of jeans. Now, even if he was a bad dude, you can't justify, you can't say, well, it's okay for him because he was bad. Well, that's a slippery slope, because then you open it up to what happens when they consider you to be just as bad as him, even if you're not. Well, I would never get to that route. But the government might get to that route. That's what you have to understand. So even if I don't agree, even if I know that some of these guys that they're talking about were home invaders and they were dirtbags, and if they broke into my house, I would have shot every single one of them and enjoyed it. But you know what? I would have been justified. It would have been self-defense. I also wouldn't have unloaded on the guy if he was cowering. And if I shot him, if I had to shoot him, I only would have shot him maybe 3 times. I only would have had to shoot him 2 or 3 times. I'm not worried about hitting the broadside of a barn like some of these cops that, I trust me, I've been at the range when they go and they try to shoot they have to requalify once a year. And, the target's at 25 feet and they're missing it completely. And you look at them and you're like, whoa, you're a cop? Even with all the paramilitary training, they're not soldiers. They're little boys pretending to be soldiers, playing war with their friends. Unfortunately, you and I are the people that are subject to this crap. My father's been a law-abiding guy his whole life. He's he doesn't mouth off the cops. He's always been respectful. He was in the military. I mean, he hasn't kissed their ass or anything, but he's always been respectful. And he's in his 70s, and he got into it with a cop probably about a year or 2 ago, a deputy, over something stupid. And the deputy didn't have any evidence or anything that my father had done anything wrong, but he was trying to grill him and, just admit guilt. You did it, blah, blah. My father, he's in his 70s, all Vietnam vet. He don't give a crap anymore. He told the deputy where to stick it. But even my father, who's like Mr. Law-abiding citizen, he does things the proper way. My dad's not. I mean, he's got an opinion and he'll give it to you, but he's not. He's like the average law-abiding citizen, what you would consider, and even. He is like, there's problems, there's something wrong. These freaking cops are out of control. So everybody can see it. I mean, you'd have to be, blind and mute to not see what's going on. So first, let me start with this. It's that, again, the title of the article is County Agrees to Pay $600,000 for Deaths in Botched Miami-Dade Police Sting. So let's listen to the first investigation, and then we'll get to the other 2.
Team 6 investigators show you what no one else can, how a Miami-Dade police informant wound up dead. Here he is with his hands up, surrendering. Moments later, he was shot by the officers he risked his life to help. And tonight we begin a special Team 6 investigation into police shootings in Florida.
And since 1989, police have shot hundreds of people across the state, nearly 600 in the last 15 years, yet no cop has been criminally charged in any. Clearly, some of the shootings are justified, but are they all?
Well, Team 6 investigator Tony Pipitone here with the story of how Miami-Dade police officers go uncharged in shootings that prosecutors call disturbing. And we want to warn you, you're going to see video here of police shootings. Tony.
Yeah, the plan was to lure accused home invaders to a vacant house and arrest them in the act. But prosecutors say the operation was so bungled, the investigation so inadequate, they cannot rule the killing of that informant and 2 others was justified. Still, they cannot charge any officer with the crime. We want to warn you, this story contains infrared video.
So they can't charge him with a crime, but the shooting wasn't justified. Well, then what was it? If it wasn't justified, is it not then illegal or murder? Well, no, I mean, it's not a crime. I mean, he's a cop. But wait, if the shooting's not if this were civilians, if they said it's a justified shooting, you were defending yourself, you're fine, you're clear, don't worry about it. Okay. If it wasn't justified, you would have charges brought against you. So how come this is different for them? As I've said before, the Law Society, a special class amongst their own.
of actual shootings. Shootings, though disturbing, we thought you needed to see. June 2011, in a field in the Redland. 3 men already lie dead when Miami-Dade police move in on a 4th, hiding unarmed under a tree, and unleash 52 rounds in what prosecutors call the most disturbing of all the killings caught on tape.
Shots fired.
To some, the botched sting operation that also led to the death of an informant was justice.
I do know.
Police Union President John Rivera.
What I can tell you is this. You had savages, and that's the best way I could describe those people. And those savages were stopped. And the good guys went home. I'm okay with that.
Now, you see, the problem is this, and yes, the guys that were going to do the robbery were, at least one of them was a bad dude, because their police informant had a camera on the informant that they killed, and like 4 hours before, you see him and the informant talking in the car, and the guy didn't know he's being recorded, and the guy, you can see he sounds like he's a ruthless dude, like he's a real deal bad guy, like if he broke into your house, you'd have to kill him, because this guy, he's like, I wouldn't run, I'll return fire at the homeowner and stuff like that. I mean, seems like the real deal bad dude, but that doesn't give them the right to just outright murder them, because if you see, the problem is this, it's like any other right you have, ladies and gentlemen. Like, you'll hear me say that skinheads should be allowed to spew the rhetoric that they spew, like the neo-Nazi skinheads and stuff, the hardcore, like, God, wearing their little Nazi, emblems and everything else. If they want to do that, I don't have a problem with that. My grandmother was in a concentration camp. I don't have a problem with that. Because the problem is this, although I shouldn't say I don't have a problem with it. I may not like it, and I may not agree with it, but who the hell am I to say they shouldn't have the right to say it? Because if their right to say it is taken away, then my right to say something could be taken away as well. What happens when someone, quote unquote, gets offended by something I say or something you say? So even if you despise what somebody is saying, if you want your freedom, you have to defend their freedom as well. Attacking their freedom to say it is not a valid argument. It's not. It's not a form of any logical argumentation at all. The freedom doesn't cause the person to do something bad. It's the will of the individual itself, but they don't look at that. Anyway, so it's kind of the same thing here, okay? So even if you don't like the person, even if they're a bad dude, it's not okay that the 4 cops murdered this guy underneath a tree. And their favorite excuse is always, well, I was in fear for my life, or he reached for something. And the police president is the guy you just heard, the police union president. You heard what he said. Well, they were scum. They were savages. The choice of words to describe the men killed versus the killers is interesting, but they do that on purpose. It's how you frame an argument. You'll hear the same police president say later that, well, we're at a war in this country. Oh, see, that's the problem. The cops in this country think we're at war. And that, obviously, if they're at war in the country, that means the citizens are the enemy. Think about that for a minute. Does that sound like freedom to you? No, it's not. It's not at all. Anyway, back to the investigation.
But prosecutors are not sure the killing you just saw and 2 others were justifiable. To understand why, we begin 4 hours earlier.
You got to go in there, be brutal, and take him down and handcuff him. Okay. Lady, whatever it is.
You are watching dead men talking.
So what do I have to do to go home? I tag these people and take them down ruthlessly.
On the left, 52-year-old ex-con Roger Gonzalez Sr., a serial home invader.
You know how to handle a 45?
On the right, the man he's tutoring on the finer points of home invasion, 39-year-old Rosendo Betancourt, a felon turned informant, a decision that's about to get him killed.
I don't know the other people. I'm trusting you. I'm going by you.
In fact, police say Betancourt was so concerned by the Gonzalez crew's violence in previous invasions, he went to them and offered to set them up. In less than 4 hours, both men and 2 others would be shot dead. From the air and on the ground, more than 100 officers wait for Gonzalez and 3 accomplices to invade this county-owned house, where the informant had assured them drugs and money await.
I need the money. I need what they got, and I got to take it.
And to get it, Gonzalez is prepared to use deadly force.
This is not to run. You hit the floor and you shoot back.
As darkness descends on the 2.5-acre lot, Gonzalez and 3 others emerge from the SUV.
I had, looks like 4-foot mobiles dismount.
But there's a problem. Betancourt, the informant, was supposed to drive the invaders to the trap and stay in the car. Gonzalez has other ideas. A snag Betancourt relays to detectives.
You heard everything, right? The problem is he wants me to go with him.
Betancourt balks.
I got 3 kids.
A bit later, Betancourt makes what is likely his last call to his wife. Then, as officers listen in, Betancourt utters the code phrase prosecutors say was supposed to signal a problem.
After this, I'm heading to Disney World.
But instead of aborting the operation or moving in to rescue their informant, Miami-Dade police let the men continue to their violent deaths. Fast forward now to when the 4 approach the house and there gather at the front corner. Watch what happens next. Gonzalez and one of the invaders sense something is wrong and take off.
I got 2 subjects running west into the trees.
30 seconds later, and we warn you again, you're about to see something quite violent. The 3rd home invader darts in front of the house holding a gun and is shot down by a sergeant. His gun later found where he fell. That left only Betancourt, the informant, at the corner with 70 seconds to live.
I got one guy at the 1-2 with his hands up.
He surrenders, getting onto the ground as instructed by officers, but the only cop there to give a statement swears Betancourt was silent, not uttering the Disney World code phrase that would identify him to police. Prosecutors say that's just not credible.
I just don't believe that the CI never opened his mouth.
But you heard the officer who shot him say he'd never said a word.
That's what the statement says.
And you don't believe it?
I don't.
Still, prosecutors say it's not evidence of a crime, nor is what happened next. Instead of handcuffing him, Sergeant Manuel Malgor says he told him to roll over on his back. That's when he says the surrendering informant made a quick move to a gun in his waistband. Cops fired 23 shots. In a statement to homicide investigators made under oath 2 years after the incident, Malgor said, "My life was in danger." Prosecutors were barred from attending. What do the officers know about what they can say?
They know what the law is, and they know, as I said, magic words are, okay, the suspect did something, and as a result of what the suspect did, I was in fear for my life.
While concluding they could not charge the officers, prosecutors say the case haunts them.
There's a whole series of things in this case that are troubling to us.
What about the fact a confidential informant who came forward to try to help the community, that he wound up dead?
That's not troubling, that's tragic. He was killed.
And he should not have been.
Correct.
But it's not a crime.
It's not a crime.
Back in the Redland, the killing was not over. Antonio Andrew, there lying arms extended as officers stood over him, is shot to death. One shooter later cited the magic words. He feared Andrew was reaching for a gun in his waistband. That left one man standing.
We got 1 subject unaccounted for.
The ringleader, Gonzalez, leaving behind his gun as he tries to jump a fence before hiding curled up under a tree. As you saw earlier, 4 officers surround the unarmed man, and when they say he moved for his waistband, unleashed 52 rounds.
Shots fired.
When all were dead, one of Gonzalez's killers thumps another in the chest and pumps his fist.
These guys have less than a second to make a decision whether they themselves live or die, whether savages get away. I praise them, I thank them, and I think the community should thank them. They're heroes.
Now, you were not meant to see the video of the shootings. We got it through a public records request. By law, prosecutors were supposed to edit out the actual killings before releasing it. When they found out they had not, they wanted it back. But we thought you should see for yourself what really happened. Prosecutors reviewed that video before determining that none of the officers will be charged with any crime. But they found only the first killing of Jorge Lemus in the driveway of that house was justified. Tomorrow night at 11, we'll reveal factors so disturbing and suspicious, prosecutors say they could not rule that the other 3 killings were justifiable.
Unbelievable, very revealing video.
Yeah.
But this is already costing taxpayers, right?
It is. The county's agreed to pay $600,000 to settle wrongful death claims from the families of 3 of those killed. The informant's family, though, was holding out for what could be an even larger jury verdict. So taxpayers are on the hook.
And a lot more to come on this story, that's for sure. Tony, thank you.
All right.
So no personal accountability from the police officers themselves. Of course, you heard the police union president there. I think they were totally justified. These guys have a split second to make a decision if they're going to make it home or not. See, that's the point. You're being told and sold that this is justified and that it's okay for cops to do what they did and just open fire like that and shoot somebody. Was it 53 times? 4 cops shoot an unarmed guy that's cowering under a tree. Well, they didn't know he was unarmed, Popeye. You couldn't shoot him twice? You couldn't shoot him in the legs? Really? And you know what? The guy wasn't armed. He had tossed his weapon, so he was unarmed. Well, we didn't know that at the time. No, because you're all amped up. See, the problem is this, and I've discussed this with John Shirley, Sergeant Shirley, when he's been on the broadcast with me before, that police have this attitude that they're a special class and that no matter what, they have to go home to their families. And you are beneath them. And if they have to kill you or your kids or your siblings or your parents or your friends or anybody standing around you, it doesn't matter. And it'll be ruled justifiable because they use magic phrases. The suspect reached for something. I felt in fear of my life. That's all they have to say. They could shoot your 80-year-old grandmother. All they got to, and it'd be ruled justified. She could be carrying a little bag of groceries. She could be walking down the street slowly, pushing that little old lady cart, you know, those fold-out carts that you see them with the groceries and stuff in. She's pushing one of those little foldable carts down the street, looking all cute like little old ladies do, and she's walking down the street all happy, right? And a cop just hops out from around a corner and blasts her. Maybe he tries to stop her and says, "Ma'am, where are you going?" And she says, "Oh, hold on, I'll get you my purse, Sonny. It's in the bag." "Oh my God, she's reaching for a gun!" And he double fisting 2 Glocks, you know, with 33 round mags in them. He's, you know, just holding it sideways like he's in a video game. Guns are down, right? Probably tases her dead body on the ground 5 or 6 times and maces her just for good measure. And it'll be ruled justified. Because he'll say, "Well, I tried stopping her for being the criminal that she was and walking down the street with that cart. It had 4 tires on it. I assumed it to be a motor vehicle. So I was pulling her over to see if she had a license, and she reached into the bag. I thought she was pulling out Osama bin Laden. So I thought I would stop bin Laden and his obvious terrorist cohort, the 80-year-old grandmother, and I would shoot her 85 times in the face and then tase her, sir." And there'll be the union president going, "Well, you know, she was a savage." You see how easy I could put those same words to your 80-year-old grandmother? Now, again, yeah, these people were not the greatest of individuals, and if they'd broke into my house, I would have shot them myself. But this was a house that was owned by the county. They had one of their confidential informants go out and seek these guys out. You'll hear he volunteered to find these guys because they were bad guys. But he volunteered to, like, lure them into a trap. He lures them into a trap, and then he himself also ends up dead at the hands of the very police he was helping. It's like a movie. Plot of a TV show. But again, even if these guys are bad, you can't say, "Well, okay, that's justified." So what happens if you're the one that's considered bad? Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment, so I want to get right back into it. So I just dropped in the chat room, and I'll tell you the title of the article. It is titled, "Prosecutors Have Doubts About Police Shooting, but Decline to Press Charges." The reason I'm telling you the title is if you just Google that, or Bing, or Start Page, or whatever you use, whatever, the article will come up. Prosecutors have doubts about police shooting but decline to press charges. And I dropped the link in the chat room so you could follow along. So let's get right back to it. Here's the audio from the second part. And the reason I'm playing this is so, I mean, they did a really good job of putting together and presenting the facts. And then I interject when I feel the propaganda meter starting to, you know, go off the charts and get into the red zone. and away from the truth. And I'll throw my analysis, but you could sit and hear me rant and rave, or I could play these 3 pieces of this investigation for you, and you could hear how the president of the police union speaks for himself. That just goes to show their mentality, and it backs up my analysis of it. And again, this isn't the problem. Everybody says, "Oh my God, this is the problem." No, this is a symptom of a much bigger problem that we need to come up with real world solutions to. So we have to come up with a solution to the symptom, but we also have to realize that it's a symptom of a much larger problem. It's not the problem itself, because if we focus on that, then the cops become the ones that get blamed solely. And although they are responsible for their own individual actions, the blame doesn't solely lie there. And we all know that. If it's part of a much larger agenda, then obviously it's like a branch off of a tree, right? So just keep that in mind. Anyway, prosecutors have doubts about police shooting, but decline to press charges. Yeah, way to go. I don't understand how they can't press charges. Well, you guys just don't want to make waves and piss off your buddies over there in the police department. When I say I don't understand, I understand. It's just me. It's like an expression. Unless you actually hear me specifically say, like, no, I really don't understand. Like, explain it to me. When you hear me say I don't understand, it's more of an expression. I should try to stop using it. But anyway, here we go. Prosecutors have doubts about police shooting, but decline to press charges. Gee, I wonder why.
He jumped the fence and ran south. He's at the northwest corner of that grove.
Watch this video, obtained exclusively by Team 6 investigators. 4 Miami-Dade cops surround a suspect as he cowers under a tree. These are the final seconds of his life. And tonight we continue our investigation into police shootings with the lingering doubts prosecutors have about a Miami-Dade police sting gone terribly wrong.
And we want to warn you here, some of the video you're going to see is graphic. Here's Team 6 investigator Tony Pipitone.
Prosecutors question whether officers who opened fire during the Redland sting 3 years ago really saw and heard what they claim, citing unusual, counterintuitive, suspicious, and disturbing factors. They had no choice but to rely on police witnesses. All others had been silenced, shot dead by the cops, leaving no proof, prosecutors say, that any crime was committed. Our story includes infrared video of actual killings. We think you have the right to see it and judge for yourself.
In the northwest corner of the grove.
Miami-Dade County has never seen anything like it. As infrared cameras roll from aircraft, police kill 4 men, including their informant, in this botched sting operation in the Redland. 3 years later, the Office of State Attorney Kathleen Fernandez-Rundle cannot say definitively that 3 of those police killings were justifiable.
Are there question marks? Of course there are question marks. There are a lot of too many question marks.
So many, her office found, no charges can be filed against the officers. When a Miami-Dade officer shoots someone, the agency's homicide detectives investigate. Rundle says cops investigating their own is a conflict of interest and wants the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to take over.
Do you think that could have had a different resolution had someone else been investigating that?
I wouldn't jump to there could be charges filed, but what I would say is this: we wouldn't be asking these questions.
Questions like, wouldn't informant Rosendo Betancourt scream out the code phrase that identified him as the informant?
I'm heading to Disney World.
He used it 3 times earlier, but when his life was on the line, police claim he was silent, then suddenly reached for a gun in his waistband, forcing them to open fire. A surrendering informant going for a gun?
There's a lot of there that just leaves big holes and big questions.
So why didn't you charge them?
There was not a crime that we could prove.
While Betancourt cannot speak from the grave, an audio recorder...
I have to pause that for a second. How is there not a crime you could prove? Again, if it wasn't a justified shooting, doesn't the term justified by itself imply that what you did was correct and it was not wrong? Therefore, if it wasn't justified by the definition of the way you're using it, then it would be, I guess, considered by your laws illegal. Hence, they committed a crime. So why are they not being charged? Can a citizen go do this? Can 4 citizens round up, say, same exact situation, same exact people, but it wasn't cops. Say it was pissed off citizens that were tired of crime in the area, and they did the same thing, and the 4 of them unloaded on that guy. Would there be charges filed against them? Same exact situation. The only difference, they could even be the same people, except the only difference is they're not police officers. Take away the fact that they're police officers and that they have that quote-unquote protection. Would they be charged? Ask yourself that. Because I think we all know the answer, don't we?
Hidden in a watch police gave him? Might have. But somehow, from the time you see this watch here until after he's killed, it disappeared.
That would have been a critical piece of evidence.
What do you think he would have said?
I would imagine that he would have been making the statements that he was instructed to make if there was a problem and to identify himself as a CI.
In other words,
I'm heading to this war.
But faced with the live officer's statement that the informant went silently to his death by reaching for a gun,
we are bound to accept the statement unless I can prove something to the contrary.
we showed the video and other evidence to attorney Gene Baker of the ACLU.
Oh my God.
Who believes there are enough discrepancies for a manslaughter prosecution.
There's no rule of law that says that the prosecutors, when evaluating a case, are compelled to accept as truthful the testimony of the subject of the investigation.
But Police Union President John Rivera defends the state attorney's decision not to prosecute.
Well, if there's not enough evidence, there's not enough evidence.
And the fact no Florida officer's been...
Whoa. Hold on. So what about if there's not enough evidence for you to make a justification whether or not you should shoot somebody? Because maybe, like in the case of the one guy who was in his own driveway getting a pack of cigarettes out of his car. He was bent over, leaning in his car, getting a pack of cigarettes out of his car in his own carport on his own property. Cops pulled up and shot him. And that was ruled justified. I mean, you can't have it one way for one issue and then another way for, well, you know, if there's not enough evidence. Well, how did you have enough evidence that the guy was breaking into the car? Because he was a black guy, so you just assumed there's your evidence and you shot him? So you didn't have enough evidence for the cop to pull the trigger, but that was ruled justified. But then when the shoe was on the other foot, well, you know, see, it's amazing. When they're being protected, it's one thing. When they're doing something else, it's always, it's like moving the goalposts, but it just flip-flops. It's whatever their agenda is that, well, you know, whatever benefits them, that's the correct answer. And everything else is wrong. That's not personal responsibility. And these people shouldn't be in these positions, period. They shouldn't have access to the costumes, the toy badges, or the weaponry. You want people with a higher level of thinking, not an IQ of 8. You don't want the school bully who used to drool on himself, okay, and maybe play football here and there to be the guy walking around with all the power. Not a good idea.
Prosecuted in 25 years for a shooting?
Well, I would suggest that the shootings are all justified.
After all.
So there you have it. The president of the union says that I would tell you that every shooting in Florida in the past 25 years by police officers has been justified. That's physically impossible. Impossible. Especially knowing some of the cases of the incidents where they might have been ruled justified, but that doesn't mean they were justified.
All he says, police are at battle.
It's a war not fought in Iraq. It's a war fought in the streets of Paradise Lost. And that war continues each and every day in Miami-Dade County.
There's a big difference between soldiers in a war in combat and police officers. The training is different, or should be different.
In the Redland case, prosecutors say the first killing of Jorge Lemus, as he held this handgun at the front of the house, was clearly justified, but are unsure about the rest. Consider Antonio Andrew. 4 minutes after Betancourt was killed, a police officer gave him conflicting orders. Don't move your hands, and let me see your hands underneath your waistband. When Andrew followed the second command to show his hands, one officer said Andrew made a quick movement towards his waist area. Officers fired a dozen bullets and killed him.
If your hands are at your waistband, how can you make a move for your waistband?
I don't know, but it made no sense to me.
But when that officer gave his statement here at police headquarters, Horn could not ask him why he gave conflicting commands. That's because that officer and others would only give statements if no prosecutor was present, just their union lawyer and fellow Miami-Dade police investigators. Of the 11 shooting officers, 4, one from each killing scene, gave voluntary statements under those conditions.
No, that doesn't seem planned at all. That doesn't seem like they all had their stories together. No prosecutors, just cops and union reps? Really? I say from now on, whenever civilians commit a crime, we try to do the same thing. We create our own civilian union. We pull the same crap that the police do. Let's see how long that would last.
The other 7 exercised their right to remain silent.
I was having nightmares about this case. I'm serious. This consumed us.
The best documented killing is the last of ringleader Roger Gonzalez, who dropped or discarded his gun as he fled and was found cowering at the base of a tree. That officer, behind the tree with Gonzalez's back to him, said in his statement Gonzalez made a quick move into his waistband, forcing them to open fire. They shot 52 rounds, but prosecutors question whether that officer was even in a position to see what he says he saw. Still, Gonzalez is not alive to say otherwise.
We've got no evidence to counter that.
And confusion or misstatements, prosecutors say, are not evidence of a crime. For instance, officers say they saw a rifle and heard a gunshot at the outset of the operation, but neither existed.
There was no long rifle, and there was no shot, which we conclusively determined.
It's troubling to us that, there was a surveillance watch that we couldn't find.
But the operation was not troubling to Miami-Dade police. The lieutenant who ran the operation, Calvin James, was promoted to major. The officers will not face criminal charges, but are subjects of an internal affairs investigation. They declined comment. As we revealed yesterday, Miami-Dade taxpayers will pay $600,000 to the families of 3 of the men killed. The informant survivors lawsuit is pending in federal court. By the way, 3 of the 4 men shot had prior felony convictions. Lemus, the one whose shooting was ruled justifiable, had none. Team 6 investigator Tony Pipitone, NBC6, South Florida.
And again, I didn't say these guys were all angels, and they did rule the first one justified because the guy had a gun and he was running with it, and it was showing. And I guess anybody with half a brain would view that as a threat. So even if I was Joe civilian walking with my gun, if I saw somebody perpetrator running with a gun in his hand at me, you don't know what he's going to do. You have a split second to decide. So, okay, fine. But they couldn't even rule the other ones justified. And they've ruled some really hinky things justified. And they couldn't rule this justified. 3 of them. Yet these cops aren't charged with any crimes. I ask you, again, if you or I did this, would we be able to get away with it? Doesn't matter if these guys were despicable human beings or not. That's why I wanted to use this case as an example. Because I knew if I used this case, I knew if I went over this, some people are going to say, well, Popeye, they deserve it. I can't believe you of all people. Look, again, I agree. They were bad individuals. And if they had broken into my house, I would have capped them myself. But this whole thing was a setup from the beginning. The house wasn't, it's not like they caught them in the act or something. It was a sting operation. It was a setup. They entrapped them, and for whatever reason, it went south, and the cops were amped up, and they gunned everybody down. And what it does is it shows you that standard operating procedure is to kill everything and everyone. Helps you understand a little bit better. That's the mentality that we have to change. It wasn't always like that, and that's one of the symptoms of this bigger problem. I mean, it is a problem in and of itself, but it's a symptom of a much larger problem. How militarized the police have become. And again, these guys were not angels. They were, at least 3 of them were known felons. Now, that doesn't really mean anything. You could blow your nose in the wrong direction and get a felony. But apparently they were. At least 3 of them were bad guys, and the 4th one that got shot, if he was partaking with it and willing to do a home invasion, and he wasn't a stand-up individual anyway, apparently. But again, where do we draw the line? If you allow them to be executed like that, what happens when they decide that your freedom of speech, because you don't agree with them beating up old ladies and tasing old ladies and stuff? Well, now you're a terrorist. I was in fear for my life, so I had to shoot your mom in the face. Think about it. I know it would piss me off. That's why I talk about this stuff. See, the problem is we can't have special classes of individuals, because then it's ripe for abuse. And we all know that. This is, common sense at this point in our history of humanity. So why don't we use our brains, right, and go in the opposite direction, start to enlighten ourselves, and realize that we're all on the same team. That's why I bring this stuff up, to expose this and bring this up. Anyway, I want to be able to fit this last part of the investigation, and so I'll play this, and then I'll have a couple minutes left to pontificate. So here we go. This is the final piece, and I dropped the link to it in the chat room already. And the title is A Closer Look at Police-Involved Shootings in Florida. A closer look at police-involved shootings in Florida. Here we go.
Tonight, the conclusion of a Team 6 investigation into police shootings in Florida.
In 25 years, there have been hundreds of police shootings across the state, but none has resulted in charges against an officer.
And tonight, Team 6 investigator Tony Pipitone here with more on the system that some say seeks not justice, but to protect cops at all costs. Tony.
Before I let it play, would somebody out there, one of the listeners, because, I don't have the time to do it, but if one of you could find the stats on this, it wouldn't be that hard. It's all public records. Find the stats, because it's, hundreds of shootings over 25 years. Find the exact number of shootings from, 25 years ago, from 2014. Well, you can either round up to 2000. Well, I'll start with 2014 and go back. But anyway, 25 years ago to today, find the amount of police shootings, and then, the fact that they're all justified, and then somebody run the numbers on that and tell me, what are the odds of that? What are the numerical chances? I know there's some mathematicians out there that listen. So if one of you guys could do that, somebody figure out the odds that over a 25-year period, hundreds of police-involved shootings, and they were all justified. That I'd like to see the odds on that.
After a police shooting, Miami-Dade homicide detectives are supposed to gather evidence and give it to prosecutors to investigate. But a former prosecutor tells us the probes are rubber-stamped, the outcome's a foregone conclusion. Consider the case of a Miami-Dade teenager shot by police 2 years ago. Prosecutors closed the case last month, but did it get to the truth of why a police officer shot a 16-year-old boy in the back 9 times?
I'm fired. I got a subject down. Put your hands down!
May 27th, Memorial Day weekend, 2012. A peaceful day spent fishing with the family, but by 3 the next morning, Sebastian Gregory says he was restless.
I couldn't sleep.
So he went for a walk, not knowing it would be the last time he'd walk normally. He grabbed a t-ball bat like this for protection. He says from bullies he knew from school.
They basically wanted to beat me up.
What we know is this. Gregory wore a scully cap and dark cargo pants as he walked down this Kendall Street. An aluminum t-ball bat like this one, 25 inches long, tucked into his pants. On top, he wore an extra-large t-shirt. Miami-Dade police officer Luis Manuel Perez stopped him, ordered him to the ground, hand showing. Gregory complied. Minutes later, the officer opened fire, shooting him in the back. The question is, why?
There was nothing I would have done differently because I was exactly doing what he told me. That's the thing. There was nothing I could do differently.
This is what the state attorney's office investigation reveals after a 2-year investigative period.
Attorney Richard De La Fera, who has represented the Gregorys in the past, calls the investigation shoddy. Prosecutors say they didn't even have the basics, like these crime photos, which the police gave to us, but not them.
It's not clear to me from this report exactly what occurred in reality.
Unclear, De La Fera says, because the story shifts over time. Police records the night of the shooting blame the time and the manner Gregory appeared.
That sounds like police harassment.
A subsequent document says the officer stopped Gregory because he saw a bulge in his clothing. Later, another cites a rash of burglaries in the area. In fact, Miami-Dade PD's own stats show burglaries within a 1-mile radius of where Gregory was stopped were down by 75% from 2 months before. In a sworn statement, 5 months after the shooting, the story continues to evolve. Now, Officer Perez says he stopped Gregory because he saw something shiny.
They're trying to make the facts fit a theory that the officer was justified in what he did.
Perez says after the teen was face down on the ground, he stopped to call for backup before cuffing him. That, Perez says, is when Gregory grabbed the shiny metallic object and Perez shot him because he was in fear for his life. Attorney Michael Filer represents the Gregorys.
If proper procedure is followed, you know what? Sebastian is handcuffed. The bat he had on him for his own protection is taken out of his pants.
And Filer says he does not get shot. We tried to ask Officer Perez about the shooting.
Can you tell me why you did shoot him 9 times? You can't help me at all here, sir. Have a good day.
Gregory says his days are filled with pain.
It's a constant pain that never goes away. It's 24/7.
The bullets damaged several organs. Fragments too risky to remove remain in his liver and close to his spine, but after months of painful therapy, he can walk short distances. Now, he says, investigators are trying to brand him a juvenile delinquent.
They're trying to vilify me just for they could say that he was justified in shooting me 9 times in the back.
Police describe Gregory's criminal history as extensive, including no contest pleas to 2 counts of damaging property worth over $1,000 and 2 misdemeanor concealed weapons charges, neither involving a gun. Officer Perez had arrested him weeks earlier for having a concealed bat and 2 8-inch knives, charges that were dropped.
He knew the kid to be a vandal.
The report also says Gregory was a documented member of the South Park Nation gang, presumably named after the animated TV show.
Come on down South Park and meet some friends of mine.
Gregory never got to tell investigators his side of the story.
I'm flabbergasted by that.
They apparently weren't interested.
He was shot, and nobody even bothered to say, can you tell us what happened?
State Attorney spokesperson Ed Griffith said by email, "We interview witnesses, not criminal defendants." But Gregory is charged with no crime. Prosecutors found Officer Perez was legally justified when he shot Sebastian Gregory. No criminal charges will be filed. Amalia and Andres Gregory are Sebastian's parents.
For me, that action is not justified because my son had 9 holes in the back.
I asked me so many times, why you can shoot so many times? I mean, you can shoot only once if you feel threatened or something.
The last time a Florida cop faced criminal charges in a shooting was in 1989. Former Assistant State Attorney David Rank thinks he knows why.
Do you think the state attorney's office wants to prosecute police officers?
I do not.
Why not?
I think that it creates bad feeling between the prosecutor's office and the police.
Rank says when he questioned whether a police shooting was justifiable in 2004, he was removed from the case.
What message is the state attorney sending?
They're not going to prosecute.
And what does that tell the police officer?
That they can shoot at will.
Between 2004, when Rank was removed from the case, until 2013, the number of fatal police shootings in the state went up by 164%. Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez says having cops investigate their own is a conflict. He wants the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to take over those investigations in his county. He also wants cops to wear cameras to document what really happens. The police union vows to fight both measures. Team 6 investigator Tony Pipitone, NBC6, South Florida.
And by the way, down here in South Florida, you'll see there'll be Democrats that toe the party line and push gun control and say only cops should have firearms. Really? Death by cop, firearm death by cop, since 2004 till now, up 164%. That's not a problem. You, being a legal gun owner, that's a problem. You could have a gun for 20 years, not have killed anybody, but you're the terrorist threat. Who's the real threat to the general public? Maybe we should have cop bans, or SWAT team bans, or cop control. Instead of gun control, we need moms for cop control. Moms against guns. How about moms against police brutality? See if any of you mothers out there that are fighting the political fight, there's a lot of you good ones. Focus your efforts on that. Don't fall for the straw man. Go after the real problem. And again, it's not so much blaming the cops either, because it's a chess game. We need to change the programming. Understand how the game is played so we can play it ourselves. Right at time, ladies and gentlemen. It's not hopeless. I know it may seem hopeless, but it's never hopeless. We'll get through it. We just have to expose this stuff so we can know it exists and then deal with it. As I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. I love you all. We will get through this. Stand together and hold the line, ladies and gentlemen. I'm out of here.